Brave Podcast Network.
We get to look for the treasures and secrets that only come about in hidden and dark places, which is our places of suffering. Those are riches. So I've had cancer 3 times, cancer of the tongue. It was so advanced, I had 2/3 of my tongue removed. You guys can hear it in my voice. Obviously, I talk with a lisp. That's awful, right? But there are riches that have been gained, not in spite of that experience, but as a direct result of it. I've decided to reframe that, and rather than thinking of myself as the woman who talks funny, think of myself as the woman who has something to say.
So what do you do when everything is falling apart and you thought you did everything right and you're wondering, what did I do to deserve this? What happened? You're on here in the Get Your Brave On podcast. I call them plot twists of life. You know, when we lean into those plot twists of life, something happens and you want to stomp your feet and you want to get mad about it. And you're like, no, God. But what if, just like in the movies, that plot twist ends up being the beginning of something even better? I think it can be if you play it right. My guest today in the Get Your Brave On podcast, I'm so excited for you to meet her. She's an author. She's a speaker, Michele Cushatt. She has her 4th book coming out soon called A Faith That Will Not Fail, 10 Practices to Build Up Your Faith When Your World is Falling Apart. Did you have to learn this? I'm guessing this is from personal experience.
Yes.
Michele, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. I'm so glad to be here. I just, already our conversation, even pre-show, was so rich. So I'm like, yay, this is so fun. I'm thrilled to be here with you and your people.
Yay. Well, I like to call them my brave babes.
Brave babes, I'm telling you, I want to be one. So I'm going to consider myself adopted into the brave babes.
We have hats. I will send you a brave babe hat. Okay.
Nice. I like it. I have earned it. In answer to your question, I have earned it.
Tell me. Okay. Not that it's a competition. Dear God, I wish we didn't have to earn our brave babe hats. But what is it in your life that made you go on this journey? What's like, okay, why are you going to put the brave babe hat on?
Well, there's so many reasons. So I'm going to give you the very quick Cliff Notes version, but it's going to sound like I'm just machine gunning my way through a story because I need to go quickly. But I grew up in a home of faith, relatively typical traditional family home, mom, dad, a brother, and me. And my parents became Christians when I was about 6 years old. And so I had this kind of sense of if you are a good person and you do everything right, you're going to end up with a good life. I mean, that's kind of the way it works, right?
Yeah, I did the same thing. Yeah.
Right? It's like a math equation. You make good decisions, you make the right choices, you hang out with the right people,
right.
And then basically God is on the hook to give you a good life. Like that's how it all works out. And so, you know, the good news is you're in absolute control of your own destiny. Doesn't that sound fantastic? But the bad news is if something goes wrong, the only person you have to blame is yourself, right?
Yep.
And it sounded good on paper until I became an adult. And I got married, had my first child. It looked like my life was truly going according to plan. Everything was lining up perfectly. And then when I was about 27 years old, 6 days before Christmas, I remember it like it was yesterday, had my 1.5-year-old on my hip, and I watched my husband drive away for the last time.
Oh, we have such a similar story.
I'm sorry for that, and also thank you, because it's nice to know I'm not the only one.
My
it's
kids
so
were
painful.
4. Yep. My kids were 4, 2, and 8 weeks old, and he came home from a business trip, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was December 19th. I remember it. You know, it's right before Christmas. What do you do? The presents are already under the tree, all of that. I was 27 years old, I believe. And my dream had always been to get married, have a family, but also to work in a church, to do ministry. And an interesting part of my story is my husband was a pastor. So I had that additional layer of loss, that it wasn't just a loss of my marriage and family, but it impacted this whole kind of spiritual, wait a second, this is not supposed to happen. I actually married what I thought was like a good person that was going to be with me forever, and he's gone.
I was doing morning radio for a Christian radio station in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm supposed to be, yes, like.
And what do you do with that? I mean, when you are doing ministry and you have kids, and then all of a sudden, the entire, like, you talk about plot twist. It's like not even just a twist. It's like the movie completely changed. It's like the whole story. And what do you do with that? And boy, let me tell you, I was devastated. I mean, I didn't have a plan B. This was it. And I'm a little bit older than you, beautiful Amanda. I'm a little bit older, but this was back in the 90s. And the church, Big C Church, didn't know what to do with divorced women, especially when it was a pastor, right?
Yep.
So there wasn't a place for me. I couldn't be a woman in ministry. I was a woman who was divorced. And there was no category for me. And so how do you reconcile that, but then even find a way to walk out this story that you never asked for or wanted?
How did you come to the point where you realized you're not ruined? I felt ruined. I felt like I was thrown out with the trash, and I kept things a secret because I felt like I was going to get fired from my morning radio show. I'm like,
yes,
and I needed my job more than ever at that point. How do you not run away from your faith when something like that happens and instead lean into it?
Yeah, that's been an ongoing journey. I mean, this whole becoming a single mom, divorced woman thing was almost 30 years ago now, 25 years ago. So it's been a long time, but it's been an ongoing journey. My initial response is similar to what a lot of women do. I said, what's wrong with me? Yeah. Right? When somebody leaves us, we go, okay, there must be something wrong with me. If I was a good enough wife, a beautiful enough wife, if I was everything that, I could possibly be, he wouldn't have left. And so for a while, I wrestled with that question, which ends up impacting our faith. Because again, we go back to that faith equation of if I do everything right, I should end up with the right result. And that's not what happened. So something must be wrong with me. So really, the first step for me was, one, I had to acknowledge reality. I couldn't live in the denial of reality. This did happen. And if I tried to pretend like it didn't happen and tried to slap on a smile, I was going to implode. And so at some level, I had to grieve the truth of my circumstance and just acknowledge this is what happened. The key, though, with that is finding safe people to acknowledge that with, because not everybody can handle our grief in a safe way, especially at times, unfortunately, in faith communities. Sometimes we have our own agendas surrounding certain topics like divorce, and we don't create safe spaces for people who are there. And so I needed to find the right safe relationships to help hold me in this space while I wrestled through the reality of my circumstances, but also, what do I really believe about myself in this circumstance? Is it really, quote unquote, my fault, something wrong with me, or is this part of the human condition?
What did you find out when you went through that process? You surrounded yourself with your safe people, your tribe.
Safe people,
call it getting your tribe right.
The right tribe. That means some people had to go that were there before, and some new voices had to come in. But part of that journey also looked like coming back to the truth of what do I believe to be true about faith in general. So much of this whole process of becoming a single mom really messes with your sense of identity, right?
Yes.
Right? I mean, I can't really even overstate that. It so wrecks your identity because all of a sudden your sense of womanhood is impacted. You go right into task mode. All you can do is survive every day. I mean, I have a degree in nursing. So I had a bachelor's degree in nursing, a nursing license, but I couldn't be a single mom working 12-hour shifts with a 1.5-year-old by myself.
No, you couldn't.
So I had to completely reinvent my career and went into computer networking sales. Talk about another plot twist, right? It's comical now. I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? But I mean, we were in survival mode. So all of these shifts, and underneath all of it is this whole question of who am I? Am I now a divorced woman? Is that what I am? Am I a single mom? Is that who I am? Or is there something deeper that is really the core of my identity? And so after I admitted my reality, I had to get back to the truth of who am I?
Who does God say you are as a single mom?
Exactly. And really, am I defined by the big D that I'm divorced, or am I defined by the fact that when Jesus looks at me, he says, "You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you." Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
If, Isaiah, can a mother forget the baby at her breast? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. I mean, I had been so forgotten so fast by my husband. But now God's saying, guess what? There is not a chance that I'm going to forget you. Getting regrounded on those truths and trying to understand that this important, significant male in my life, this husband figure in my life, does not reflect God's response reaction to me.
Yes. Yes.
This is hard. I'm saying this so easily, but this is like at some level you have to kind of like, here I am, a former nurse. If you have a burn, you have to get rid of the dead tissue and get to the real stuff. And so part of my process I needed to debride the lies I had believed based on my husband's rejection of me and start to build my identity on the truth of actual flesh and bone, like truth of how God feels about me. And that was a really important step for me starting to walk out my new life as a single mom.
And to make that plot twist end up becoming a really great thing.
Yeah.
Because I think we risk, and I think we all do it. And if you're in that place right now, you have my full love and support. Like, it's okay to not be okay
Totally.
for a while. It's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay there.
Yeah.
And then it's okay to mourn. I remember this amazing woman, a pastor, said, she goes, it's a death. It's okay that you're mourning a death of, when you're in a marriage and you're united as one, that's a person. It's almost like you're mourning the death of an entity, a person in your life. So give yourself credit to mourn that.
100%.
And now it's time to create something new. And
I call that the practice of lament. So in this new book that I wrote, A Faith That Will Not Fail, I open the book with the practice of lament. And to approach it from kind of a metaphor standpoint, a couple of years ago, there was a massive wildfire here in Colorado that in the span of hours destroyed 1,084 homes. It's called the Marshall Fire. You can look up about it. But in the span of hours, just imagine that, 1,084 homes were just decimated. What's so interesting is everybody wanted to see the families with their new homes, but it would take months, and actually it's been 15 months now, and the rebuilding is just starting now. The reason for that is before you could start the rebuilding of something new, you have to deal with the debris of the old.
Yeah.
So months have been spent bulldozing all the ash, all of the burnt shells of homes, all of the things that cannot be resuscitated, could not be resurrected. Mm-hmm. All of that had to be dealt with so that way healing and rebuilding could happen on fresh ground. And so you and I, that's why when we tell people to get over it or move on too quickly, we're actually doing them a disservice. Right. Because they can't build something new until they deal with the grief and lament over the old. Mm-hmm.
What do you have to do? Like, how do we dig up the ashes and physically take the junk to the dump? And you're like, I really want to move forward. Like, is there a specific practice you could help one of the brave babes go through right now?
Oh, I love the brave babes. I mean, every time you say that, I'm like, I just want to squeeze them. I love them.
I know,
okay.
Right?
So, several practical things that I've done to help kind of weed through the debris of multiple losses, okay? Part of that, like I said, you have to acknowledge reality. A lot of times we live in denial, or we try to recreate the dream that we once had. We see this by hurrying up and dating somebody really quickly after a loss.
Right? Thinking you'll fix it by getting remarried again. Yeah. Everybody makes the mistake.
Everybody does that. I did too. So, I mean, but when we do that, all we're trying to do is ignore the reality of our loss. And that's why it's so important we talk about it. Because there's multiple different ways we try to live in denial. And sometimes it's just diving into a new relationship. And the problem is the rubble is still there. The debris is still there, regardless. So, one, acknowledge reality and acknowledge that this is a legitimate grief that requires voicing. Another practical step for kind of giving voice to that is journaling. I know that sounds kind of lame, but I needed to actually process it. And there is something powerful about either handwriting or even typing in your computer that helps untangle what's going on in your head. I am a huge believer in journaling, and you don't have to do it every day. Don't follow rules. Just allow yourself to kind of get some of that out, especially if you have little ones at home. They're not the ones you should be processing with, and we all know this. But it ends up coming out sideways if we don't have some place to put it. And a journal is a great way to safe place to put it. I also highly, highly recommend counseling. Good, solid.
Therapy's the best.
Therapeutic, support. I am a huge believer in that. There is nothing wrong. I've been going to the same therapist for like over 12 years. Yes. And I tell her, I'm like, do you ever think you're failing because I keep coming back for so long? And she's like, no. And so we're reframing it, that counseling is not to fix something. It's actually a growth environment. So view counseling as being, like if you go and get your master's degree, you're not going to additional schooling because you were so bad at it in kindergarten through 12th grade. You're going because there's value in education. The same is true for counseling. View it as an education. I highly recommend counseling, so journaling, good therapeutic counseling, staying connected to community on a consistent basis. Highly recommend. And although online circles are valuable to some extent, I highly recommend that you find a way to have face-to-face relationship with people somehow. So that community piece, as you kind of walk through the processing your grief and losses. Another practice I did, very, very practical, is when I was feeling the grief kind of overwhelm. And we know what that feels like, right? When it feels like it's right up to your chin. And you're drowning and you're going to explode. Like you're either going to explode by bawling so hard you're hyperventilating, or you're going to like throw something against the wall because it's just too much. When that happens, I would block some time to allow myself to literally name the things that I lost. So I got a spiral notebook, and I just made a list. And everything that I lost as a result of this circumstance, whatever it may be, I named it. Like I lost normal Christmas holidays with an intact family around the tree. I lost being able to talk to somebody about my day at the end of the day. I lost my innocence, believing that I could trust that when somebody says they love me, that they really mean it and won't leave. I mean, I could go on and on.
Oh, I just cried.
You can feel those, right?
I felt all of those. I remember thinking, not to make this about me, but I remember thinking in a therapy session with my amazing therapist, going, I lost the joy of a new baby. Because she was just 8 weeks old. And she's like,
that was a loss.
There's no fix for it, but acknowledging it helped. So what do you do once you write all those things down?
Well, some of it was just a matter of I needed to say it. I need to get it out and catalog it. Kind of think of it back to that wildfire analogy. When you have your house burned down, you need to make a list of everything that was in the house to give to the insurance company, right?
Oh, yeah.
So view it kind of like that. You're taking stock of what was burned up in this loss. And that helps you to acknowledge that thing, that ache you feel, it was real and it's gone now. And that's sad. Right?
Like,
so some of that process is, the magic is just simply naming it, like taking stock of it. But if you want to take another step, I would take that. I had a chimenea outside and I would burn it. Like, at some point, and do something physical to, to say, this really ticks me off. I'm really ticked off. I'm really upset. This is not okay with me. It's not fair, and burn it. Sometimes I wanted to keep it because it became a sacred, almost like a tombstone that I could honor these losses. I don't have to live there, but honor them. But at the end of that list, either way, I would just, write a prayer at the end that basically says, God, you see and number my tears. You number my tears. You validate my losses. You see this. It's not lost in your sight. And you're moved by my suffering. Those are verses from the Bible where God says he's moved by our suffering. And write that over the top of it so it's acknowledged.
I would always be comforted when God says, when we're weak he is strong for us.
Yes.
And when we ask for his presence in those weak moments, he says, and where my presence is, there is my strength. Mm-hmm. So it's like you get stronger just by being weak and asking for help, you're getting stronger. So we're going through this, we're digging up our ashes, we're clearing out everything. So we're going to make room in our plot twist, though. We've got to make the turn. When you go down a dead-end road, you have a choice that you could stay there, or do you want to turn around and you got to get out? So how do you go get out? So no one wants to stay there. So how do we resist the urge to dwell in our sorrow and become bitter and angry and be like, well, that's it. Like, I'm leaving the church. I'm just going to be done. I'm out. I'm just going to be sad. Like, how do we then make the turn to say, okay, now I really want to reinvent my life because I know God says that he has plans to prosper me, not to harm me, plans to have hope for my future, plans to give me an abundant life, even with all this junk that just happened. What do you do next?
Yeah, so, let's look at the land where the house burned down. You can't get that burned down house back, okay? But you can build something new. So start to think of, once that grieving starts to ebb, and by the way, the fact that you got tears in your eyes is evidence that grieving is never just done. It's a process. And you can have times where years later it comes back and you feel that tenderness again. And that's beautiful. Make space for it, right? I just love that you demonstrated the active, ongoing process of grief. But once the grieving starts to ebb, you start thinking about something new. As awful as it is to lose everything, it also allows you to build something brand new that you wouldn't have had the opportunity before. So what do you want it to look like? Allow yourself to start dreaming. So there's the start dreaming part, but then also, and this is so critical, I coach people to do this all the time. The reality is as awful as your suffering is as awful as your loss is, those experiences gave you an expertise that you could have never gained any other way.
Yes.
Right? So like what you're doing right now with this podcast. I mean, you would have never had this expertise if you hadn't gone through the fire. I mean, it was the fire that actually gave you the education to hold space here, which is creating redemption for countless people.
Yeah.
But it's not just true for you and me. Right. It is true for every single person that has gone through something hard. And so what you try to do is, I liken it to this idea of mining. So I come from a long line. My ancestors came from England. They were copper miners. So they worked in the mines, mining for copper. My dad worked in the mine in Arizona. My grandfather did too. I mean, we come from a long line of miners. The whole interesting thing about mining is, first of all, it's a whole lot of work to get a little bit of gold or copper or whatever it is you're mining for. But the process of the mining or coming up with the treasure, it only comes about under pressure for long periods of time. Okay? It's the pressure for long periods of time that creates some kind of element that's worth mining out of the ground. But then you have to mine for it. And I love that idea because guess what? There are treasures. There's another verse, I believe, in Isaiah that said there are secrets in hidden places, treasures in darkness. So we get to look for the treasures and secrets that only come about in hidden and dark places, which is our places of suffering. But those are riches, right? And so you start to look, what is awful as my suffering was, as unfair as it was, there are riches here. What are they? Can I look for them? Can I dig for them? Can I search for them? Another part of my story is that I've had cancer 3 times, cancer of the tongue, which is head and neck cancer, very severe. I shouldn't even be here. But the most recent time I had cancer, it was so advanced. I had 2/3 of my tongue removed, many lymph nodes in my submandibular gland removed. You guys can hear it in my voice. My vocal cords were so burned, and my tongue, obviously, I talk with a lisp and things like that. But that was another significant loss. And again, I've lived on the cusp of my mortality for a long time now, knowing that it could end at any moment. Well, that's awful, right? But there are riches that have been gained, not in spite of that experience, but as a direct result of it. I now have a very unique voice. For a long time, I was tempted to not speak anymore because I thought my voice sounded annoying. People wouldn't want to listen to me. However, I've decided to reframe that, and rather than thinking of myself as the woman who talks funny, think of myself as the woman who has something to say.
Oh, yes.
Right? And the sound of my voice now is so unique and it's so different that I've had people that hear me on the radio or something and don't even see me but hear me, and they know it's me because I have such a unique voice. Well, the truth is, can you see I'm getting excited? The truth is for all of us, our circumstances give us a unique voice. This is so exciting. It's painful and exciting. It's the fact is your unique circumstances have given you a unique expertise and a unique voice that alone can speak into the pain of somebody else. Now, those are riches. That's treasures in darkness. That's gold worth mining for. We just need to find it and realize that there is that possibility there. It's not all gone. So this is the other part of that practical exercise. After you catalog your losses, start dreaming about what's possible. What unique gifts, talents, experiences, wisdom, insight, opportunities have come not in spite of your loss, but as a direct result of it. Mm-hmm. And like for you, one of those would be your podcast. It would be I'm sure, speaking to opportunities you've had to talk to single moms. It might even be just your unique style of mothering because of your experiences that make you a better mom as you raise up your kids to live differently.
Mm-hmm. And to be strong, I think I never would have had the radio career that I would have had unless that would have happened. Because I was just it was like a part-time gig. It was just something I was doing for fun. And then I became a national radio host as a single mom. That's something that I never thought I would achieve, speaking to millions every single day on the radio, because I had to provide for my family on my own. And then speaking as a single mom to Christian audiences. Yeah.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And that came as a result of unimaginable loss. Mm-hmm.
Within a year.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know about you, Michele, but I think when you're in that plot twist and you're in that, you're doing the practice of lament and you're starting to dream for what you want. I think what I would love my brave babes to know, if you're in that process, I feel like it happens sooner than you think once you make that turn.
It does.
Because for me, it was a year. It was 1 year to the date that my ex left that my kids and I were on a plane moving from Washington, D.C. to Northern California to start life over, to chase down a dream job. And I had gone through this process, but sometimes I think we keep thinking that I would love for you to make a shift from thinking that calamity is going to be around every corner now. I get it, it's hard, but understand that what if it all works out?
What if? And what if it's even better?
Yeah,
I mean, what if? It will be. I mean, that's kind of that's the whole miracle of what God does. In the Old Testament, in Ezekiel, I believe, where it talks about the valley of dry bones, and he puts flesh on them and breathes life into them. It's even better than it was before. I think of Job's story and how many things he lost, but at the end of Job, his life is even better than it was before. God has this extraordinary talent to take the things that we thought would be our biggest devastation and actually make it our salvation, right? The thing that we thought would absolutely destroy us ends up becoming the things that builds us. And we can't see it, we can't imagine it, but he does it every single time. So when we start to make that shift, all of a sudden, we release what was and start getting excited about what will be.
Yes.
And that is, I still remember the day after my divorce, after being a single mom. I remember where I was standing. I was walking my son, taking my son for a walk. I had a jogging stroller because I was that mom that was running. I was trying to keep my mental health in line, right? Because I was a big, hot mess. And so I had this massive jogging stroller with my son. And by the way, my son was like a giant meatball. He was so... He was so big and chubby that pushing him in this jogging stroller about killed me. But I'll never. He's now 26. I'll tell him later. I called him Meatball. But I remember where I was standing, and I remember looking up and here in Colorado, and the sky was blue, and there were the puffy marshmallow clouds, and the sun was shining on me. And all of a sudden, I realized in that moment, standing there, I'm going to be okay. In fact, life is good.
Yeah.
Life is good. It's okay. I mean, it just happened. It was just a moment. And there were still some hard things and challenges. That's part of life. But if things are feeling hopeless, just know it's going to come and it's going to happen faster than you think. And then all of a sudden you're going to wake up one day and realize that, one, you're okay, and two, you still have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and you go back to that journal that you've been keeping, the power of that journal. So I go back to mine, and it's evidence. What you're writing down in your journal right now is going someday to be evidence of how good God is in your life. Because you're going to read that, and you're like, oh my gosh, I was so worried about that, and it turned out okay. And it gives you evidence to know that whatever you're worried about now is going to end up being okay.
Yes.
And when you put your faith in the right one, you don't put your faith, forgive me, I can just preach on this. You don't put your faith in another human being to fix your single mom life, another guy to fix it. They're great. I'm not knocking men, okay?
But they're not the savior.
Right. That's not going to be your savior. You restore the first love of your life, and you put your faith in him. You're like, it is going to be okay. Because he's mad about you and he's wild about you. And wants your life to work out and he wants you to be more happy, even more than you do. So
absolutely true, right? And he sees your unique gifts, your unique talents, all of this. He's the one that wired you up. So he knows exactly how to bring all of those things together and give you the full life, the rich life with him that he's promised. So, I mean, it really is exciting. It's not in the moment, but it really is quite the adventure.
I hope you can capture that adventure. Michele, I could talk to you forever. So, anything I didn't ask you, or any special message for the brave babes, women maybe facing a plot twist that are looking for strategies to silence fear and go move forward to the life that God has called to them? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think when we go through a disappointment with another human, a significant relationship, whether it's single motherhood, whatever, when there is a human who fails us, we start to assume that God will fail us as well. And this is really kind of part of the heart of a faith that will not fail. How can we have a confidence in this other relationship when so many other human relationships have failed us? And really, that's the source of our fear quite often, is the reality that we can't control what the people do around us. We can't control all of our circumstances. So a faith that will not fail brings us back to these tiny, bite-sized daily chapters. By the way, there's 10 practices, but 5 days for each practice. Bite-sized pieces of confidence or content that gets us grounded and rooted again, the truth of what God says about us, who he is, and who we are in relation to him, so that way we can stand secure and grounded no matter what happens. And I just think that's such a critical point, that just because a human fails doesn't mean that God will fail. Just because a human leaves us, God will never leave us. A human will reject us, but God will never reject us. He says he receives us. And getting really grounded in those things will go a long way to help us to be brave babes who are not afraid of what will happen tomorrow, because we know that whatever is coming, God goes with us in it.
Yes, as he says, I realize it's not an option. He says, have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? But then he promises he'll go with you wherever you go.
Yes, that's the difference maker, right? I don't have enough chops to be courageous every day. I just don't. But I carry the mighty presence of God with me every single day. That's what gives me the courage to keep going.
And that's what'll give it for you too. Thank you, Michele. You're incredible. Okay, check out her book. A Faith That Will Not Fail, 10 Practices to Build Up Your Faith When Your World is Falling Apart. Out now. Get it on Amazon. How else can we connect with you?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on my website. You can go to michelecushatt.com. That's where you find my social links, everything else. But I love to hang out on Instagram, do video stuff to encourage people in the moment, as well as Facebook. Those are two of the best places to be able to connect with me. But otherwise, at my website, there's all kinds of free resources. I'm all about resourcing people, so go to my resource page. You can download. I have a whole download on verses to help overcome fear. That would be really helpful for your people.
Yes.
You can get that for free, and those verses I pull up when I start to feel the fear tornado take over my head. So
I love that. I'll put the link in the show notes to that free download for you so that you can find that real easily. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you for that resource. That's amazing. You're awesome.
Thanks, Amanda. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Brave On podcast. I would love to meet you. Leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. Call my hotline, 530-4AMANDA, or email me, amanda@amandacarroll.org, and connect on socials at Amanda Carroll Show on Facebook and Instagram, and at Brave Single Moms on TikTok. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Most importantly, if this podcast struck a chord, maybe you thought of a friend who could use it, copy the link and text it to them and say, hey, I thought this might inspire you today. It's a really important message that we pass along. Thank you so much. And if you want more podcasts to help you live a strong and courageous life, follow the Brave Podcast Network. Lots of podcasts to strengthen your faith, give you VIP access to your favorite Christian artists, and help in your parenting. Find all the shows at bravepodcastnetwork.com. Get your brave on.